Have you ever walked out of the hardest season of your life, expecting one face and found nothing but empty pavement? That was me. 63 years old, standing outside St. Augustine Medical Center on a Tuesday morning in February with a paper bag holding everything I owned. A pair of jeans, 2 shirts, a Bible someone had left in my room, and a phone that had 11% battery. The cold came off the concrete in waves. I could see my breath. My daughter was supposed to be there at 9. It was 10:45. I had called twice. Both times it went to voicemail. Her voice on the recording sounded the way she used to sound when she was young, before everything, bright, a little rushed, like she had somewhere to be. "You've reached Vicky. Leave me a message and I'll get back to you." I left two. I did not leave a third. I sat down on a bench near the entrance and I watched cars pull in and pull out. Families, couples. A man about my age walking slow with a cane, his wife holding his elbow with both hands, not saying anything, just holding on. I looked at that for a long time. 6 weeks. I had been inside that place for 6 weeks. I want to be honest with you, because that's the only reason I'm telling this story. I want to be honest about what those 6 weeks were. They were not some vacation, not some quiet retreat where you sit in a circle and drink herbal tea and talk about your feelings. They were the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. And I have done hard things. I buried my wife. I built a business from nothing in a town where nobody knew my name. I raised a daughter alone for 11 years after her mother got sick, doing everything. The school lunches, the parent-teacher nights, the prom dress shopping that I had absolutely no business being part of. I did all of it. But those 6 weeks were different, because in those 6 weeks I had to look at myself without flinching, and what I saw was not easy to sit with. I started drinking the year my wife June was diagnosed. She had pancreatic cancer, and she was gone in 9 months, and something in me just broke. I don't know another word for it. It wasn't slow. It wasn't a gradual slide. It was like a window shattering. One day I was a man who had a glass of wine with dinner on weekends. And then I wasn't. I won't go into all of it. But I will tell you that by the time my son-in-law, Vincent, finally staged what he called an intervention in my own living room, where June and I had watched every Christmas movie ever made, where we'd argued about whether to buy the house in the first place. By that point, I was not in good shape. Vincent had organized the whole thing. My daughter sat on the couch next to him and didn't say much. He did most of the talking. He had printed things out. He had a folder. Afterward, he had made arrangements. A facility, St. Augustine. He'd looked into it, he said. Good program. Good staff. 12-step based, but with a clinical component. He made it sound like he was doing me a favor. Maybe he was. I still don't know exactly what he was doing. What I know is that on December the 29th, my daughter drove me to the front door of that place, gave me a hug that lasted about 4 seconds, and said, "Dad, this is good. This is going to be good." And then she drove away, and I walked in, and I did not come out until February. When I came out, she was not there. I sat on that bench for nearly an hour. A woman came out to smoke, one of the nursing staff, still in scrubs, probably on a break. She glanced at me once and didn't say anything. I appreciated that. I didn't want anyone to ask if I was okay, because I was holding everything together by a thread, and I knew that if someone asked me a direct question in a kind voice, that thread was going to snap. At 11:30, I called my daughter again. This time it rang 4 times, and then a man picked up. "Vincent." "Hey, Gerald," he said. He had this way of saying my name, Gerald, like it had 2 more syllables than it does. Gerald, like he was reading it off a form. "I'm waiting outside," I said. Vicky was supposed to be here at 9. There was a pause. I could hear something in the background. A TV, I think, or maybe a radio. Something with voices. "Yeah, she's not feeling great today," he said. "She's been under a lot of stress. The kids have been a handful. I'm sure you understand." I didn't say anything for a moment. "I've been inside for 6 weeks," I said. "I know, and that's great." "That's really great, Gerald. You should be proud of yourself." "Hey, can you maybe grab an Uber?" "I'd come myself, but I've got a work call at noon I can't move." I looked down at my phone. 11% battery. I didn't have a credit card with me. Vincent had taken it when I went in, something about removing temptations, which I'd agreed to at the time. I had the cash that had been in my wallet the morning of December 29th. $47. "Sure," I said. "I'll figure it out." I hung up. I sat there and I breathed. Just breathed. The cold air went in and came out and went in again, and I made myself stay on that bench instead of getting up, because I knew that if I stood up in that moment, I was going to do something that I would not be able to undo. I don't mean anything dramatic. I was going to cry. And I hadn't cried in front of anyone in 20 years. Not since June's funeral. I took out my wallet and counted the cash. $47. An Uber back to my house, which was 40 minutes away, would cost somewhere between $35 and $50 depending on the time of day. I had checked this once, months ago, but for some reason I couldn't even remember now. I was thinking about what to do when I heard boots on the pavement. Excuse me. A man was standing a few feet away. He was somewhere in his mid-40s, solidly built, wearing a gray wool coat and carrying a coffee in one hand. He had one of those faces that looks like it's been through something, not rough exactly, but settled, like a man who had learned to be still. "I don't mean to bother you," he said, "but I was inside picking up my uncle. He pointed you out through the window and said you looked like you might need something." "I'm fine," I said, "because that's what you say." He nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer. He sat down on the other end of the bench without being invited. In any other circumstance, I might have found that irritating. I didn't. "You just finished the program?" he asked. "6 weeks," I said. "That's not nothing," he said. He said it simply, without the slightly too emphatic quality people use when they're trying to reassure you. He just said it like it was a fact. We sat there for a moment. Then he looked at me. "You waiting on someone?" I almost said yes. Then I almost said it was complicated. What I said was, "She didn't come." He was quiet. Then, "Your daughter?" I looked at him. "How'd you know?" "Lucky guess," he said. "I've seen a lot of people come out of places like this. The ones waiting by themselves, it's usually a daughter. I don't know why that is." I didn't either. "I'm Theodore Marsh," he said, and he put out his hand. I shook it. "Gerald Sutton." He looked at me for a moment and something shifted in his face. It was subtle, not dramatic, just a slight stillness, like when a word comes back to you that you'd been trying to remember. "Sutton," he said. "Are you from Harwick County originally?" Something cold moved through me that had nothing to do with the February air. "Born and raised," I said. He stared at me for another moment. Then he shook his head, slow, like he was doing arithmetic he didn't quite believe. "Mr. Sutton," he said, "do you remember, about 22 years ago, you had a hardware store on Clement Street? Sutton's Supply?" I remembered. Of course I remembered. That was the first business I'd built. I'd sold it when June got sick, because I needed to be home. "I remember," I said. "I was 19 years old," he said. "I was sleeping in my car in the parking lot behind your store. It was November and I had $30 and a dead phone. You came out the back door to take out trash and you found me there." He paused. "You didn't call the police. You didn't tell me to move along. You asked me when I'd last eaten." I sat with that for a moment. I didn't remember the specific incident. I want to be honest about that. I had done things like that more than once over the years, because my own father had always said that a man who can eat should help a man who can't, and that stuck with me. But I didn't remember this particular boy, this particular November. "You fed me," he said. "You let me sleep in the back room for 3 nights. And when I left, you gave me $160 you said was extra from the register, and I knew even then that was not true." He smiled. The first time he'd smiled. "And you told me to call my mother, because whatever happened between us, she was still my mother." I sat with that. "I called her," he said. "Took me 2 more weeks to actually dial the number, but I called her. She's been gone 8 years now, but I got 11 more years with her because I called." I didn't trust myself to speak for a moment. "What do you do now?" I asked, because I needed to say something ordinary. "I'm a physician," he said. "Emergency medicine. I'm over at Clearwater Regional mostly. Sometimes I cover shifts at University Hospital." He paused. "I've spent a lot of years looking for you, actually. Not intensely. But I'd think about it. I'd wonder if you were still around." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his keys, and then he put them away again, like he'd made a decision. "I'm taking you home," he said. "And before you argue with me, I want you to understand something. You're about to tell me you're fine and you can handle it. And you probably can. But sometimes letting someone do something for you is not weakness. Sometimes it's just letting the circle close." I didn't argue with him. His car was a dark blue Volvo, clean inside, the kind of clean that means a man lives alone or close to it. He had a bag from a drive-thru on the back seat, and he asked if I'd eaten, and I said no, and he handed me the bag without making a thing of it. I ate a lukewarm breakfast sandwich on the way home, and it was the best thing I'd tasted in 2 months. We talked, or I talked, and he listened, which is more accurate. I told him about June, and about the years after, and about the slide, and about the 6 weeks, and about the bench. He didn't interrupt me, and he didn't offer opinions, and he didn't say things like, I understand, in that way people do when they want the conversation to move on. He just listened. When we got to my street, I noticed the truck. It was a moving truck, one of those mid-size ones you rent by the day. It was backed up to the garage of my house, and two men were carrying boxes out through the side door. I said, "Stop the car." Theodore stopped the car. I got out. The cold hit me again, and I barely felt it. I walked up to the truck. One of the men, young, maybe 25, wearing a Clemson sweatshirt, looked up. "Who authorized this?" I said. He blinked. The guy. The homeowner. "I'm the homeowner," I said. He looked at the other man. The other man looked at his clipboard. "We got a work order from," he squinted, "Vincent Callara." He said this was his property. I stood there for a moment. Then I turned around and walked back to Theodore's car. I want to skip ahead here, because what happened next took weeks and involved a great deal of paperwork and phone calls, and if I told you every detail, we would be here all day. But I need to tell you the important parts, because they matter. What I found out, piece by piece, through my daughter's attorney and my own, was this. When I went into St. Augustine, Vincent had me sign a general power of attorney. He'd told me it was so he could manage any financial matters that might come up while I was inside. I had signed it. I was not in a good place when I signed it, and I did not read it carefully, and that was my fault, but it was also exactly what he was counting on. In the weeks after I went in, he had used that document to refinance the house. My house. The house June and I had bought in 1989, the house where my daughter had grown up, taking out a home equity line of credit for $240,000. That money had moved through a series of accounts. Some of it had gone to a business he had incorporated in Georgia that I had never heard of. Some of it was not yet accounted for. He had not discussed any of this with my daughter. She didn't know. I want to be very careful here, because I know how this sounds, and I know what some of you are probably thinking. I thought it too at first. I thought, how can she not know? How can you be married to someone and not know? But I talked to her eventually, really talked to her. Not on the phone with Vincent in the next room. Just the two of us, sitting at my kitchen table after the locks had been changed and the moving truck had been made to leave. And she sat across from me, looking like she'd aged 10 years and 6 weeks, and she said, "Dad, I didn't know about the money. I didn't know any of the money part. I thought, he told me the truck was getting rid of your old things. Things from before. He said it would be good for your recovery not to have so many reminders around." I looked at my daughter for a long time. She looked like June, she always has. Same eyes, same way of holding her mouth when she's trying not to cry. "Why didn't you come get me?" I said. Not angry, just asking. She put her hands flat on the table. "He said you'd arranged an Uber. He said you'd called him and you were fine. He said you specifically said you wanted to come home alone, that it was part of your process." She looked up at me. "I should have called you. I know that. I should have called you myself." There was a long quiet. "Yeah," I said. "You should have." And then I reached across the table and I put my hand over hers, because she was my daughter, and because June would have wanted me to, and because 22 years ago I had learned that the circle closes. It just sometimes takes longer than you'd like. Theodore was not done. I had told him what I'd found that first day, sitting in his car in my own driveway while the moving truck was made to stop. He had listened the way he'd listened all morning, completely, without performance. Then he said, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." "All right, do you have documentation of what the house was worth when you bought it? The original mortgage? Any refinancing you did yourself? Tax records?" "I have a filing cabinet in the garage," I said. "June kept everything." He nodded. "I have a friend," he said. "She's a financial fraud attorney. Good one. She does elder financial abuse cases." That's what this is, Gerald, legally speaking. This is elder financial abuse. It's a felony in this state. I sat with that word, elder. I had never thought of myself that way. "I'm 63, I said. "I know," he said. "But the law doesn't really distinguish that much. What distinguishes it is the power of attorney, the timing, the things. He did this while you were in a treatment facility. That's not ambiguous." He made a call that afternoon. Her name was Patricia. No, I'm sorry, her name was Anne Strickland. She answered on the second ring, and within 40 minutes, she was sitting at my kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, and she had the kind of eyes that made you understand immediately that she had heard worse than this, and she was not afraid of any of it. "Tell me everything," she said, "from the beginning." So I did. The power of attorney was invalidated within 3 weeks, on the basis that I had signed it under circumstances that my St. Augustine therapist was able to document in considerable detail: impaired judgment, coercive environment, inadequate disclosure of terms. Anne filed in civil court. The district attorney's office, separately, opened a criminal investigation based on the movement of funds. Vincent did not take this calmly. He called me 4 times in the first week. I did not answer. He called my daughter, who by then had moved herself, and my 2 grandchildren, twins, 7 years old, a boy and a girl, into the spare bedrooms of my house, because she had consulted her own attorney and been advised not to stay in the marital home while things were active. My house was full again for the first time in years. I will not pretend that was all easy, because it wasn't. There were mornings when I'd find my grandson at the kitchen table at 6 a.m., eating cereal because he'd had a bad dream and couldn't sleep, and I'd sit with him and we wouldn't talk about anything important, and it would be fine. And there were evenings when my daughter and I would be in the same room, and neither of us would quite know what to say, because there were things between us. Not just the last 6 weeks, but years of things that hadn't been said yet, and we were both too tired to say them. But we were in the same house. That was something. The civil case was settled 8 months later. I won't give you the exact number because that's not really the point. But I will tell you that what was taken was largely recovered, that the home equity loan was unwound through the court, and that the $240,000, most of it, came back. Vincent's business in Georgia was found to have no legitimate operations. His attorney tried several times to characterize the whole thing as a misunderstanding arising from my diminished state at time of signing. Anne took that argument apart in about 45 minutes of deposition. The criminal case is still active as of me telling you this. I will not speculate about what happens there. What I will tell you is this: the day the civil judgment came through, Theodore came over for dinner. My daughter cooked. She makes this chicken and rice thing that June used to make, same recipe, same cast iron pan, and the smell of it fills the whole house in a way that I cannot quite describe to you without getting into feelings I am still learning to be comfortable with. My grandchildren sat at the table and ate everything on their plates, which any grandparent will tell you is not something you take for granted. After dinner, Theodore and I sat on the back porch. It was October by then, and the air had that particular quality October has in this part of the country: dry, a little cool, smelling like leaves and wood smoke from somewhere nearby. I still don't remember you, I said, from that November. I want you to know that's not false modesty. I genuinely don't. I know, he said. You told me that the first day doesn't bother you? He thought about it. No, he said, because I think that's actually the point. You weren't being kind because you thought you'd be remembered. You were just being kind. That's rarer than people think. I looked out at the yard. June had planted a dogwood tree back in the 90s, and it was still there, still going every spring. You couldn't see much of it in the dark, just the shape of it against the slightly lighter sky. I almost didn't go into treatment, I said. Did I tell you that? No, Vincent was pushing for it. And because he was pushing for it, I didn't want to do it. That was my stubbornness. I thought, if he wants me in there, there must be a reason that has nothing to do with my health. I paused. I wasn't wrong about that, but I needed to be in there. I needed those 6 weeks. You can be right about 2 things at once, Theodore said. Yeah, I said. I'm learning that. A car went by out front, its headlights moving across the side of the house. The twins were in bed. My daughter was inside, doing something at the kitchen table. I could see her through the window, bent over her phone or a book, the lamp making a small yellow circle around her. She's going to be okay, Theodore said. He wasn't asking. I think so, I said. She's strong. She got that from her mother. She got some of it from you. I didn't argue with him. There's a thing they tell you in recovery. More than one thing, actually. There's a lot of things they tell you, and some of them are more useful than others. But one of them is this: you cannot control who shows up for you. You can only control what you do when they don't. I thought about that a lot, those first weeks, standing on that bench in the cold, watching the moving truck in my driveway, sitting across from my daughter at my kitchen table while she tried to explain herself, and I tried to listen without hardening. You can only control what you do when they don't. What I did was this: I stayed sober. I let a stranger drive me home. I opened a filing cabinet that my wife had organized 20 years ago with her careful handwriting on every folder tab, and I handed those folders to an attorney, and I let her do her job. I let my daughter and my grandchildren move into my house even though I wasn't sure it was a good idea. I sat on a porch in October with a man I'd met in a parking lot, and I let myself be grateful. That's it. That's the whole of it. The people who move against you are counting on one thing: that you'll be too broken to move back. That the fall will be the end of the story. That when you come out of the hardest season of your life, standing on cold pavement with $47 and a dying phone, you'll have nothing left to fight with. They don't account for the stranger on the bench. They don't account for 22 years of a circle that hasn't finished closing yet. They don't account for the fact that what you put out into the world has a way of finding you exactly when you need it to. Not a minute earlier and not a minute later, but right on time. My name is Gerald Sutton. I am 63 years old. I came out of treatment on a Tuesday in February with $47 in one paper bag, and I am still here.